Right, are we all back? Jolly good. Yeah, Damien's just reminded me we have a few councillors who have joined since this morning. Does anybody have any other declarations? Councillor Young? No. Aurora? No. Roy? Do you have any other declarations of interest or anything? No, it's fine. Okay. Oh, Tim. Tim, do you have any declarations of interest? I should know, just from there's fine, Tim.
Just say it, Tim.
Yeah, we can pick it up.
Okay, I think I can speak loudly enough. I have an ex-NRI as an Exmouth Town Councillor and also as a member of the Planning Committee at Exmouth Town Council and Vice Chair of that Planning Committee.
This is to do with agenda item 12, land south of Cortlands Lane. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think we should do the toilets first, or should we move till after? Okay. So we'll
Was that Vice Chair, Tim? The Planning Committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we've got one more application left over from this morning, which hopefully won't detain us too long, although the last one did. This is 252125 VAR. This is the toilets in Salton Hill, Budley Salterton, pages 108 to 118 in your agenda pack. And I believe this is an application by East Devon District Council, that I've vaguely heard of. Okay, over to you, Wynne.
Good afternoon. So this is an application to vary the approved plans condition for a previous planning permission, which was for the erection of new toilets, replacement toilets, and the changes for which the variation is sought is to relocate the downpipes, add extractor fans, emergency beacons, and a mesh security fencing and repositioning of the door. So this is the site of the toilets here at Budley Salterton on the seafront. And this shows a Google image showing the original toilet block that has now been demolished and replaced. This shows the site plan as constructed. So the toilets have now as constructed are a little bit closer to the cliffs themselves. And the cycle parking has also moved to the western side of the site, previously on the eastern side. And here's the as constructed drawings. Visually, the constructed scheme isn't particularly different to what's been approved. And there's a comparison drawing coming up, which I think probably more clearly shows the differences. I think the most noticeable difference being the provision of this mesh fencing to the sides and going up behind the building, which have been erected for security purposes. There were also two conditions applied to the original planning permission, which details were not provided for prior to development commencing, and that related to the details regarding any external lighting to be provided, and also details regarding materials to be approved. So this application now includes the details of the lighting that has been installed, and the Office of View is that that is acceptable both visually and in terms of any impact on ecology. We're now able to see the materials as proposed, and they are what was envisaged at the time of the approval and are deemed to be acceptable. So this shows you the comparison details between the two. So the differences being the as constructed, including downpipes, beacon lighting, repositioning of this door, and then the erection of this mesh fencing, which is more clearly shown here. So this is as is built. So here's the cycle stands, the seating planter, and then here you've got the mesh fencing. And as you can see, due to its its colour and the openness of the mesh, and because it's set with this dark green landscaping behind us, it's really not particularly visually intrusive, and officers consider to be acceptable. And similarly, there's a bit of mesh fencing back here, which is equally quite recessive visually. And you can see the changes, the downpipes, the lighting and beacons on the front of the building. Overall, the officer view is that the changes are relatively minor, have no material impact to the quality or the visual amenity of the scheme, and this is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. We've got one speaker, which is Councillor Young, speaking in his capacity as portfolio holder for environment.
I'll stay quiet on this one. You want to get these through today, so I'll be quiet on this one.
Okay, in that case, we can go on to questions. Oh. Yehudi.
In view of our discussion last meeting about the Seaton toilets, what are the chances of people getting stuck in the toilets during a storm?
I think that one was answered last time.
Yes, it was.
No, I think it was a fault which has since been rectified.
Yeah.
I understand. Okay.
Steve?
Any other questions?
Steve, have you got your hand out? Whoop,
No,
put it
not for a
down.
question. Brian, did you have a question?
He wants to propose.
No. Yes, absolutely. Right. Ian, I think you were first.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose, because there are no issues with this one of safety or anything like that, I would like to recommend approval as per officer's recommendation in this case, and I'm not going to compare it to any other toilets that we might have.
Or not have.
Yes,
Second. Thank you, Brian. Do you want to say anything in support? No? Anybody? Well, this really looks like marking our own homework, doesn't it? I think even if it was another application, I think we'd agree the changes are very minor. No concerns of any sort here. So in that case, we have a proposer and seconder, and so all in favour? Now, Brian, I'll just check with you. Was that unanimous? Jolly good. Fine. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So that one's approved, so people can now go to the toilet. Not you. Fine. That brings us to agenda item 12, because 11 is coming after that. So this is application 232740 OUT. It's outline planning permission, land south of Cortlands Lane, Exmouth. Pages 141 to 183 in your agenda pack. I don't know if I need to declare an interest as an Exmouth Town Councillor. propose the, no, I don't think it's still liable, actually. I can't see that there would be any effects for Exmouth Town Council. So. I think it's too small, isn't it?
No, they will get sued unless they're going to self-build, which of course they might do, to avoid paying it.
Jill will tell me. 6, there's only 6 of them. There's less than,
Still is regardless, it's affordable housing.
oh, sorry. I'm getting myself muddled. Yeah. Okay, over to you, Jill.
What is the position for Exmouth Town Councillors, seeing as you are one?
Yes, I've just said that.
Do we need to declare it?
I think so, as it looks as though it's still liable. I was getting mixed up, but I thought if it's, yeah, you, if I was thinking if it's less than 10, they're not still liable, but that's affordable housing, not. So yes, so Amanda, I think any of us who are Exmouth town councillors, that would be NRI, ORI.
So does it affect their finances and well-being? No. So it's not an ORI then, so it's an effects.
Not
So-
my. It would affect the finances of Exmouth Town Council if it's still liable.
Yeah, so it affects it, but it doesn't directly relate to the finances. If it directly relates
No.
to the finances,
No, no.
because it's their application effectively,
Yes.
the ORI. So it's an effects NORI. Now we have to look, would the members of the public believe that you'd be affected to a greater extent than most people?
I doubt it very much.
So then it's just an effects, it's not prejudicial. So it affects NORI.
Thank you, David.
That is for
That's
Councillor
myself,
Davey.
Councillor Bailey, Councillor Gazzard, Aurora as a town councillor, but you're not voting anyway, Aurora, so you're all right. Yeah, Bailey, Brian,
For the clarification.
yeah.
Councillor Duncan as well.
Okay, nobody else. Yeah. Fine, carry on, Jill.
Thank you very much. So this application is for land south of Courtlands Lane in Exmouth. The application is before the Planning Committee as the officer recommendation is in conflict with comments received from Lympstone Parish Council, Exmouth Town Council and from a number of ward councillors. The site is this one here, circled in red. It's currently an undeveloped, well, part of an undeveloped agricultural field south of Courtlands Lane. The site has a strong hedgerow boundary to the northern side of the site and is in an elevated and open position with views back to the estuary. The site is outside of but contiguous with the built-up area boundary, which follows the development around Courtlands Lane. But the site is inside the coastal preservation area as defined by the local plan. Outline planning permission is sought for residential development on the site for up to 6 dwellings. Permission is sought for access only, with matters of appearance, layout, scale and landscaping reserved for future consideration. Under the current local plan, the site is in the countryside and subject to Strategy 7, and under the current local plan there are no policies that would permit open market housing in local or neighbourhood plans. However, the emerging local plan is now at the second Regulation 19 consultation stage, which means it now carries slightly greater weight in decision making. And the site is allocated under the emerging local plan, listed under allocation XMO 23 for 12 houses. So the application coming forward is just for 6 houses, so for half the allocation. And the application site is for half of the allocated site. So a further material consideration is East Devon's housing land supply, which means that the tilted balance also applies to the application. So in terms of the emerging allocation, the wording of the allocation states that the land south of Courtlands Lane will form a small-scale development on the northern side of Exmouth to accommodate around 12 new homes. The scheme will need to demonstrate how safe pedestrian access, avoiding on-road walking, will be achieved to surrounding and neighbouring areas. The site is in a broadly sustainable location, being next to the built-up area boundary, and the site has good access to public transport and to nearby cycle paths. The illustrative site plan here shows potential pedestrian access through the allocated site to the north. So this site here is allocated immediately to the north of Courtlands Lane, is allocated for 100 houses under the local plan. An application has been received, but that has yet to be determined. So whilst there is a potential plan for how the pedestrian access could come forward, until that application has been determined, at the moment, this proposal doesn't comply fully with the wording, because obviously there are no pavements along Courtlands Lane and there's no street lights. There is, however, good visibility along the road, and cars do travel relatively slowly, so that pedestrian access is reasonably safe, although not fully compliant with the wording of the policy. So this does weigh negatively against the proposal. In terms of the prevailing character along Courtlands Lane, there's a prevailing linear pattern of development of detached and semi-detached houses along the lane. And the illustrative plan submitted shows development following the existing building lines and continuing with this linear theme. So here's the existing site. So that's the existing dwelling. So the development would continue this building line, and you can see the site sloping gently down to the south. That's the existing hedgerow to the north that would be retained, other than to make a new access through for pedestrian access at that point. This is the existing access along Courtlands Lane. It is relatively narrow. There are no pavements, and there are no passing places either. So, which could lead to erosion of the existing hedge banks, given the narrowness of the lane. That's the view from the site looking back towards the ex-estuary and the Holden Ridge. The application is supported by a landscape and visual appraisal, which considers the impacts of the scheme from various viewpoints. The proposals as presented would introduce development into the designated coastal preservation area and would be evident in views from within and around, and it is likely to give rise to a number of impacts, resulting in some landscape and visual harm. The application would break the skyline in views. You can see there, this is a view from the footpath to the south of the site, and the application site would be here. At the same time, the development would be seen in the context of existing development to the west and the east of the site, so the houses on this side and Limpston Manor to the west of the site. The illustrative scheme also shows an attenuation pond to the south of the site, which would be in a prominent slope. In terms of heritage, Grade 2 listed Limpston Manor sits immediately to the west of the site and is accessed via Courtlands Lane. The garden boundary wall to Limpston Manor is also Grade 2 listed. Presently, there is limited intervisibility between the site and Limpston Manor, owing to buildings and trees that sit between the application site and Limpston Manor. Any detailed application coming forward should seek to avoid harm through the use of appropriate site boundaries, appropriate densities of development, appropriate materials, and individuality of the house designs to avoid adverse impacts to the heritage asset. In terms of the impacts to the wall, you can just see the listed boundary wall along the northern side of Courtlands Lane here, which is about 8 feet tall. Concerns have been raised by the Conservation Officer regarding the impacts to the wall, primarily a result of the works to create a visibility splay from the junction, which is discussed later on. Lympstone Manor itself turns its back on the wall and is designed to look away from the site and out towards the estuary. In terms of the visibility splay, the drawings demonstrate that the splay can be achieved without any harm to the wall, and as such, there would be no physical impacts to the wall. No impacts are predicted to Alaronde, further away from the site. So you can see there the visibility splay, which has been designed at 2.4 by 33 metres, which was determined following speed testing to measure the speed of traffic using the road. So the proposed visibility display is in accordance with the manual for streets. This is an old illustrative site plan, but it shows that the access to the site can be created. In terms of the vehicular access to the site, Devon Highways have commented that the increase in traffic arising from the development would not create an unacceptable trip generation or any detrimental impacts on the local highway network. In terms of affordable housing, comments have been received that the application is seeking to circumnavigate the affordable housing policy. In response to this, the applicant has provided a layout showing a future development to show that 12 houses would still be possible to maximise the allocation. The next phase of development would trigger affordable housing provisions across the whole site in accordance with Strategy 34. And a Section 106 agreement would be drawn up to ensure the remaining portion of the site remains available for development. In terms of ecology, mitigations are proposed in terms of bird, bat boxes and bee bricks in the dwellings, and conditions on lighting are proposed to avoid impacts to boundary hedges used by bats. A landscape and ecological management plan would also be required by way of condition. The applicant has also included an outline landscape strategy which would seek to restore historic field patterns. In terms of BNG, there's no statutory requirement for the application to provide a 10% uplift in biodiversity net gain across the site, as it was submitted in 2023 before the legislation was implemented. And this is the view looking west from the site across to Lympstone Manor. So you can see there the intervening buildings and vegetation which limit into visibility between the site and the listed building. So in terms of the impacts of the scheme, the positive impacts are the site is allocated under the emerging local plan, which is now at second consultation stage. The site is in a sustainable location immediately adjacent to the built-up area boundary. The proposal would be seen in the context of existing development to the east and west of the site. The site could be implemented without harm to the setting of Lympstone Manor, subject to a sensitive design coming through at reserved matters stage. There are no highways objections to the scheme, and the proposal would make a valid contribution to local housing supply. In terms of the negative impacts of the site, the proposal does not fully comply with the wording of the allocation in terms of pedestrian access, although there is potential for this to be remedied should the site to the north be implemented. The proposal would introduce development into the coastal preservation area. The proposal would lead to some direct and indirect adverse impacts upon the landscape character, and the proposal could impact along existing hedges along Courtlands Way, although again, as discussed in the report, there is potential for the access road to be rerouted through the site to the north. Overall, in terms of the tilted balance, the impacts of the development are felt to outweigh the disadvantages. Therefore, the scheme is recommended for approval, subject to a number of conditions, so reserved matters within 3 years, approval of reserved matters, pre-commencement conditions in respect of hard and soft landscaping, the landscape and ecology management plan, a pre-commencement condition in respect of construction and environmental management plan, a water conservation and efficiency strategy, external lighting design, the provision of ecological mitigation and enhancement features, and details of cycle storage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jill. Right, so we have a number of speakers, starting with objectors. We have Andrew McCausland. And you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew McCausland, a neighbour, and I'm objecting on landscape and environmental grounds. The land south of Cortlands Lane adjoins Lower Holston Farm along the foot of the Holston Valley. The farm, which occupies the greater part of the valley, was bequeathed to the National Trust in 1996 by the farmer Stanley Long. He wished to preserve in perpetuity the landscape of this unique estuary site, as well as the working farm. He recognised the trust would be probably the only organisation available to protect his legacy, land being of huge value to developers. The trust created a permissive path around 2015 to provide a link from the River Exe Trail to their property at A La Ronde. This allowed public access to the farm for the first time and has become an extremely popular walk. So today you can walk this path, which meanders down the valley. The landscape officer comments on its sense of tranquility. Catch a glimpse of the rolling landscape and ex-estuary from Cortlands Lane, or enjoy an estuary cruise when the whole of the valley, with its network of fields and hills, opens up from an estuary perspective. That today we can enjoy this unspoilt landscape is due to Stanley Long's foresight. In 2015, the then Planning Committee rejected a planning application for 2 houses on the land, citing the special landscape and environmental issues, as well as road safety, as crucial factors for refusal. 2 houses. We are now faced with a plan for 6, with the possibility of another 6. The policies that led to the rejection of the plan for 2 houses are still current, but not inviolate. They can be overridden in exceptional circumstances, presumably, in this instance, to meet housing targets, seemingly at any price. This is a plan for an exclusive upmarket housing estate of large houses. It addresses none of the housing problems we hear so much about. As an estate with roads, pavements, and lighting, it would urbanise and degrade this part of the valley, as well as severely impacting on the wildlife. It will extend into the valley beyond the existing building line, which has existed since 1932, when housing finished along that section of the road. It is small in comparison with other sites, but will have a disproportionate and damaging impact on this special landscape. The price is simply too high. The council's landscape architect noted, in understated style, the development of the site will likely give rise to a number of direct and indirect adverse effects on the site and surrounding landscape character, including the loss of greenfield development. Stanley Long died in 2000. I think he would have recognised this proposal for what it is, creeping development and vindication of having chosen the National Trust to protect the valley and his legacy. So you, the Planning Committee, have a chance today to stamp your own legacy on the valley and protect this special landscape for future generations. I respectfully ask you to reject the application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Could you just press the button on the microphone? Nope, still hasn't gone off. Doesn't look like it anyway. That's it. Thank you. Okay, we have another objector, Sarah Edwards.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Edwards. I'm a resident on Cortlands Lane, and I'm here on behalf of many individuals and neighbours to strongly object to this application. 12 key reasons for this plan to be rejected today have been highlighted in the planning report. A previous planning application from 2014 for 2 houses was refused. The same objections remain valid today. But most importantly, the biggest concern to all of us should be that of safety. Cortlands Lane is a very narrow, single-track country lane with no pavement, and it would be impossible to put any in. There are no passing places. Vehicles are using driveways and causing damage to every property. Street lighting is minimal, so visibility is poor, and there are many dark sections down the lane, particularly near the proposed site. The junction with Exeter Road is substandard and frequently blocked. There is no safe pedestrian access. The proposal is for ultimately 12 large family homes. To use the suggested local transport links, the children from these homes will have to walk this narrow lane twice a day to get to and from school. As stated in the 2014 planning application refusal, this is not an attractive option. So homeowners will be reliant on a car for their primary mode of transport, which then increases the volume of traffic up and down the lane. The addition of the suggested 12 properties is an increase of 63% to the number of homes between the A376 and the site, with the associated increase in number of vehicles travelling up and down the lane. The application refers to a road traffic analysis from November 22, which is outdated. A survey conducted by one of our residents just last week shows numbers which are more than double. Traffic activity has increased. There are more Amazon vans, supermarket deliveries, visitors to and from Lympstone Manor, both deliveries and tourists. This latest survey also counted 69 pedestrians, this on a wet Tuesday in February. The East Devon Way runs down Cortlands Lane and is a popular hiking and walking trail. More people will be using this stretch of road in the warmer weather. Many are families with children, buggies and dogs at risk from the dangers of such a busy and narrow roadway. It is a common occurrence to see people squashed up against the bushes to allow the traffic to pass. It can be impossible to get through. More cars, vans and lorries from this development will cause even more problems. Just last week, there was an issue with cars coming up the lane, meeting a large lorry trying to get down. There was an impasse for several minutes, and finally the lorry driver reversed back onto the A376 Exeter Road, the main artery into Exmouth. This cannot become the norm. Accidents are waiting to happen. More traffic means more risk. I strongly urge you to refuse planning for this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and perfectly timed. The agent, Dan Rogers from Bell Cornwall.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. We hope that members will endorse your officer recommendation and support our client's application today. The scheme has been in planning for several years. It's been through positive pre-application discussions, and it has also been promoted through the emerging East Devon local plan process, where officers and strategic planning committee members have supported the allocation of the land. By way of background, discussions relating to this application first started back in January 2023. Initial pre-application views were sought from officers on their support for either a 6 or a 12 dwelling scheme. At that time, this site was being considered for inclusion within the emerging local plan, but draft allocations and housing numbers had not yet been fixed. The clear advice from officers at that time was that support could potentially be offered for a 6 dwelling scheme. The advice was duly followed and is essentially why the current proposals are before you now. The local plan process has now ultimately caught up with the determination of the application to a certain extent. The site is part of allocation Exmo 23, which allows for a larger site area of 12 dwellings. The technical work undertaken confirms a scheme of both 6 and 12 dwellings can be accommodated, but the proposals here will not prevent the delivery of the wider allocation. However, the scheme is in its current form because of the clear pre-application advice that was received. It is not a way of circumventing the delivery of affordable housing, as has been suggested by some objectors. The applicant is very, very open to the whole site being delivered and wants that to happen. We'd also remind members that access along Cortlands Lane is suitable for pedestrians. We note the concerns that are raised. Ultimately, if the scheme to the north of Cortlands Lane is delivered and our client's land is delivered as part of 2 allocations, pedestrian connectivity will be enhanced locally. However, in the absence of this, you'll note there was no objection from Devon County Council Highways, and that Cortlands Lane, in our view, does provide a suitable walking environment for pedestrians. There are suitable natural refuge points, along the lane where people can pull in if traffic is coming. And also, as has been mentioned, it is recognised as part of the East Devon Way, which is a well-used walking route in its own right. Whilst we recognise the landscape sensitivity and the coastal preservation area designation, the photos in the officer presentation you've just seen do demonstrate the mature landscaping that exists. And this, in our view, is effectively infill development that will sit amongst established buildings to the east and west. Heritage impacts are also minimal due to intervening buildings and vegetation, and the neighbouring properties that are there. Whilst we don't want to repeat the officer report in detail, the position is pretty clear. The site is part of an emerging allocation, and members are not being asked whether they would allocate the site today. That decision has been taken, and the site is clearly deliverable. The scheme is submitted, obviously, against a housing shortfall of 3.5 years housing land supply and can be supported on that basis. There is officer support, and any perceived harm does not significantly and demonstrably outweigh benefits of housing delivery. Ultimately, there are no statutory or technical objections that justify refusal. Finally, just to conclude, obviously the means of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping are all matters that are reserved for a later date, so you will have control over those issues if deemed necessary in the future. We trust you can support the very fair and balanced officer report and support the application on this basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll hear from the adjoining ward member, Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm the neighbouring councillor. Cortlands Lane is the boundary between the village of Livingston and the town of Exmouth. I agree with most of the issues the objectors have said. Yes, it is in the coastal preservation area, and yes, it's Cortlands Lane is part of the East Devon Way, and I know that a lot of people use it. I use the lane a lot with my bike, and yes, it is a tricky navigation, getting around cars, going into the nettles, especially when you've got short trousers on. My main issue, however, is the sewage capacity within the Exmouth network. According to South West Water, there is sufficient capacity with the sewage treatment works and the network. This is because there was a change in the EA permit capacity for dry weather flow, and there is now capacity, allegedly, at Exmouth Sewage Works. However, it's not about the capacity of the sewage works, but it's the reliability of the whole of the network, plus the ability of the pumps to cope with the capacity increase. We all know that residents' toilets back up around Imperial Road, so they can't flush their loos whenever it rains. Manhole covers blow pretty well every time it rains on a mere nature reserve, and spill after spill at various pumping stations suggest not all is well with South West Water. Yes, I agree, they are working hard to improve the sewage capacity for Exmouth, but hand on heart, I can't guarantee that this is not going to compound the already known problems for the sewage works. These additional 6 houses definitely will not improve the ongoing problem at Exmouth Sewage Works, and therefore I would like to see a ramping order set on this application. I know it's only 6 houses, but 6 houses possibly too many. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. And now the ward member, Councillor Tim Dumper.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to focus today on 3 or 4 different aspects of this. There are many, many reasons why an objection should take place to this application, but I think the 4 of the really important ones are the valuable landscape, heritage and wildlife in the area, which hasn't been mentioned, such things as the rare bird searle buntings are in the area. So we need to be very, very careful of those. The road access, which has already been extensively covered by residents here, a narrow lane, and I do note the suggestion that access could be via Limp 07 as the site over the other side of Cortlands Lane is described. I personally feel that until application is approved on that, there should not be talk of road access via such an application. I also feel that with the road access goes amenity of local residents, and we've had described how there have been damage to gateways, etc., along the road, and I know talking to residents there, that happens fairly regularly. So that's a real issue. This issue of coalescence of Exmouth with Lympstone, there had been what was known as a green wedge. Whether that's still in existence until the new plan takes effect, I'm not absolutely certain. But the green wedge was on the Lympstone side of Cortlands Lane, but as has been mentioned, we have a substantial portion on the Exmouth side, which is actually National Trust property, and that whole area gives rise to this open area and access and views onto the estuary and the coastal protection area. So from that reason, I feel this proposal should be opposed. And finally, the housing supply, which we know East Devon hasn't got a 5-year supply at the moment, but frankly, neither the 6 nor the 12 for the whole site will either be of the type required for the main needs or make a substantial dent in the housing supply problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, on to questions. Councillor Barlow. Steve, is that hand up?
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions. First of all, in the new emerging plan, is this in a coastal preservation order, or has that been moved to allow for the allocation of this site, which you did say was number EX20, whatever it was, 3, was it 3 or 4? So has the coastal area been moved in the new local plan? Secondly, and I know you go back to the affordable houses will be protected, but we deliver 25% of affordable houses on the site. So if it's a site, and it only kicks in when there's 10 or more houses. So if it's a site of 12, you get 3 houses. Are we saying that we're not getting any on this bit because it's just for 6, so we're going to pass that. But when we get the next one in to allocate the full 12, which is in the new local plan, should they decide to do that, we'll then get 3 out of the 6, which would be the quarter, 25% of the 12, which would be half of it, which from experience, developers then turn around and say, well, I can't do it because it's unaffordable. So then you lose out on affordability. So I know you're saying that there isn't, and you're going to do a 106 agreement on this. Is the 106 agreement going to be on this application that they must apply? I just don't understand why we're doing half of it and not all of it for 12 houses. I'd be much more comfortable with 12 houses. 3 of them will be affordable. And that's it.
As it's outside the built-up area boundary, strictly speaking, it ought to be 50%.
Well, but I was saying that it would be in the new local plan as an allocated thing, so that would be technically only 25%.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying on this one. So are we getting 3 of them then? In which case, on this allocation.
So on the matter of affordable housing, the way that our affordable housing SPD is written is that if a site is broken up in this, as it is in this way, then once So effectively, this would not be subject to 106 for affordable housing, the 6, but the next application that comes in, should it come in for the further 6, would the affordable housing would be calculated on the full 12. So you would still get ultimately the same numbers. And that's specifically within the SPD to prevent people slicing things up to avoid affordable housing. In terms of whether the site is still allocated in the coastal preservation area, neither of us know that offhand. I can try and have a little look in the background, but I don't know that.
So can I just have reassurance then that when the second allocation, and if it doesn't come in, we don't get any affordable housing? So that's the first point. The second point is if it comes in then, and then the developer says it's not affordable to deliver 3 houses on that site of 6, we then have to accept that and step back from it and say, well, okay, it's not affordable, so therefore you can carry on. Whereas with 12, it would have been more affordable because you're spreading it over a bigger number.
So at the moment, both sites are in the same land ownership. Obviously, that could change. But again, in terms of viability, the expectation is you'd be looking at the viability of the 12, or if it is a situation where the sites have been sold off, then effectively that affordable, the policy should have been taken into account when assessing land value. So that's how it would be looked at a viability stage. So we would, I think the fact that it's come in as a smaller site wouldn't affect ultimately how we consider the viability at that stage.
And sorry, but again, because this is outline only, why would you not apply for the whole site? Why would you only apply for it? It's outline. When it comes to the actual developing the full site, putting in the full details, you could just do half of it then and do that, but the whole site then is passed and we would get our affordable housing. Although they assure us that this isn't a way to avoid paying money that they don't need to, it does seem that it might look to the public that would be the case.
I can understand how it could be perceived in that way, but obviously we've had the explanation from the developer. But at the end of the day, we have an application before us for 6 houses, and that is what we have to consider. This really becomes more of an issue if and when we get an application in for the further 6.
Again, so I don't want to argue at this point, but at the end of the day, at that stage, it's too late. You've already given planning permission on the 6 houses at the front, and should, as you say, should the developer change, should he sell that bit of land to somebody else who comes along and says, it's in there, I can put another 6 houses here, and then he can say, I can't afford to put in 3 affordable houses there, it doesn't add up. You would have to back down and allow them to get away with not giving affordable housing. So how it works in the affordability test, they're forever doing it.
The expectation is that if that the land value, if that land was sold on, should reflect the fact that there is an expectation that 3 affordable houses are going to be delivered on that site, and that is how it would be assessed. There's always, regrettably, there's never certainty in these things, but our SPD is very clear that if a site is subdivided, that once that affordable housing threshold is met, albeit in chunks, that the full affordable housing quota should be delivered.
And if we wanted to, we could put a condition on it that we have to deliver affordable housing on this site or not?
No, we couldn't, because it doesn't meet our thresholds in itself, because it is still only 6 units.
Even though it's in the outside the built-up area boundary?
Correct.
And just one last, it doesn't cost any more to put in outline planning permission for the 12 houses than the 6 houses, does it?
Yes, it would. Outline planning permission, the application fees are based on either the number of, well, it'd be the number of dwellings proposed.
Okay. Councillor Heath and then Councillor Gazzard. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, really. If the planning permission's granted for 6 houses, isn't it then becomes much more difficult to subsequently refuse an application for a further 6 houses on that site?
Through you, Chair, sorry. So on the same site or on the other part of the allocation?
Yes, apologies if I didn't make that clear. If you grant outline planning permission for 6 properties to be built on that site, and the applicant wants to build another 6 houses later on, would it, if outline planning permission was granted for the 6 houses, wouldn't it then become more difficult to refuse any further application for a further 6 houses? Because if you've already got the precedent of having built 6 houses, by my logistics and understanding, it would be then more difficult to put caveats on the building of another 6 houses if that is what the council wanted to do to control the amount of building on that particular site. Am I making myself clear?
Yeah, I think we understand what you're saying, John, but I think I think we're getting a bit hung up on on the possibility of the rest of the application coming in. We haven't really considered this application yet. But I think that would have to be considered on its own merits, and there could be a number of reasons why. I think you can't necessarily say precedent, because these houses are viewed in the context of the rest of the road and the development that already exists. Another 6 further down the field could be a very different prospect.
I think I just mean precedent in the sense that if the application was granted, then that sets the precedent for potentially further development. I know that there's an argument about whether there would be mitigating factors, pros and cons to that, but I just wonder if outline planning permission is granted on that particular site, would it then not be more difficult to refuse further building? But that might be a hypothetical. I'll take it.
Well, we do a lot of hypotheticals here, don't we? Yeah, king of the hypothetical you are, Ian. Yeah, please do, Wendy.
I suppose it's just to clarify that the site allocation is for 12 houses. The proposed allocation is for 12. So assuming that allocation is rolled forward, the expectation would be that it's very likely a further application would come forward for 6 if this 6 are approved, because that's in the emerging local plan.
Thanks, that helps to clarify my thinking.
Okay, Councillor Gazzard, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd heard Wendy say that this application doesn't qualify for S106. Would it qualify for sill payment, please?
It would, unless it was self-build, unless they were brought forward as self-build.
Okay, and Councillor Collins, Bethany.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question of the agent just for my own clarification. I was just wondering, you mentioned the refuge points for passing in the lane. Obviously, I've looked at the lane and I've heard from the speakers. I just wondered what you defined as those refuge points, because there's concern about that being people's driveways and gateways and causing damage to the property. So I was just wondering what your definition of the refuge was.
I think I can probably answer that one because I've walked down there on a number of occasions. Yes, basically the refuge points are where you can walk into a driveway to allow a vehicle to pass, and I agree, you do get quite a bit of traffic up and down that road, quite a lot of vans especially, yeah, it's usually a driveway. It gets more difficult as you get further down the lane because of the limited number of houses down there, and there's fewer driveways to jump into. I think it's mentioned as the East Devon Way, but I think the East Devon Way then cuts off, does it? Or does it continue all the way down Cortlands Lane? There is a footpath off to the right as you're going down the lane, which takes you down to the village of Limpston, if you go far enough, or via Southern End. But yeah, I think that's what they mean by refuge points. Okay, any further questions? Councillor Levine. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to register an interest as a resident of a very narrow rural lane with no refuge points. So for that, it really appeals to me against building anything there. On the other hand, and that's really what bothers me a little bit, we've got Cortland Lane is a linear collection of houses, and there is a gap. Well, I'm happy with filling the gap, but it seems to me, I know it's only outline. If you're going to fill that gap, it really ought to fill it with a linear 3 houses that will fit in there, not 6. Is that a planning consideration?
Well, not at this stage, because we've got to consider what's actually in front of us, but I agree. Although, yeah, in terms of the actual housing down there, some of it's set quite far back from the road, and so there's quite a pattern of development. I think if you have a look on Google Maps, that will kind of show you the layout so far. Okay, no further questions. Okay, we're on to debate then. Don't hold back, Ian. Well, I think I would, you know. This reminds me of when I was in seminars, you know, at university, and nobody would speak. The professor would ask a question, and everybody would sort of look down at the floor, and eventually, Yehudi knows what I'm talking about. It eventually, I would think, well, I better break the silence, you know. Also, I had read the books, which helped, but then I was a mature student by then.
Thank you, Chair. I am concerned about the affordable housing. I know you have explained what you're doing there. I just can't quite understand, if it is in the local plan for 12 houses, why you wouldn't, and that's what we're relying on here. There's 2 things we're relying on. First of all, the balance you have to take into consideration. One is the affordable housing, and secondly, the affordable housing is one of the things of the balance. The second is the lack of overall housing. But again, because we're supplying affordable housing, that tilts the balance even further. I agree that there is houses to the left of it, houses to the right of it. It seems a natural gap to fill in. So I understand why it's been put in the local plan, which is coming. We agree with our local plan. The council has voted on that. They have supported that. That has gone forward now. But I don't just quite understand why they're only putting in for 6. And I just feel that we will be losing out on affordable housing, which is something that we desperately need. I'll be interested to see what other people think before I make a proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Steve Hunt.
Thanks very much. I'd very much like to agree with your comment there. I'm very suspicious. Why are they only putting in for 6? They own the other land. They could have put in for 12. It does still look to me as though it is an attempt to avoid providing affordable housing. And I don't know what their reasoning is for only putting in for 6 when they own the whole lot anyway.
Okay. Well, once again, we're speculating about the motives of the applicants, aren't we? Yeah, I do understand the concern here, and I think Mrs. Ormsby's tried to answer that as well as she can. Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, like my colleagues that have just spoken, I'm concerned about the affordable housing, and why we've only come in for 6 when it's allocated for 12. But that doesn't make this application right. I have grave reservations about it. As rightly has been said, it's in the conservation area, and I've seen on myself the damage that has been caused to houses and buildings on the way down through that very narrow road, and it's not ideal for pedestrians anyway. And I'm also concerned about traffic. There will be extra traffic if this goes ahead, and even more if another 6 go in. With the problem with coming out of Cortlands Lane at the top by Exeter Road. But I am concerned about I understand Exmouth Town Council and Lympstone Parish Council have neighbourhood plans, and this goes against their neighbourhood plans. I'm sorry, I don't have the plans in front of me, so I can't tell you which paragraph they are. But that doesn't seem to have been mentioned at all anywhere that I can see. But at this moment, I'm not sure which way I'm going to go on this one at the moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I've just been reading this, the submission by Lympstone Parish Council, which I totally subscribe to. I mean, this is building in the open countryside. It's outside, obviously outside the built-up area. It's in a coastal protection area. And much to my amazement, Highways have put no objection in. Well, it's a single track road with no pavement, no sufficient light, no passing places. The only passing places are people's driveways. And the longer I look at the map here, the further it goes down, there's no passing places at all between the last house on the left-hand side and the entrance to the proposed development. Not one passing place. So it's unsustainable. It really is. And how officers have agreed to support it is beyond my comprehension, to be honest with you. And I can't support this at all, Chairman. Thank you.
Well, I think perhaps there's no objection from Highways because the question has to be how much worse will this make the situation? Not how bad is the situation, but how much will it add? No, it's definitely not going to do that. Okay, but you've made your point. Thank you. Councillor Smith, sign.
As I consider what way I'm going to forward with this one, I was considering that on previous applications, we have had to think carefully about the timing and order of developments, especially in areas where development is coming. I know when we've talked about Seaton and very early on in this term that we've had as councillors on the planning committee, we had to look at one site and had to turn it down because of pedestrian access, because we knew there was another site coming and what we had in front of us wasn't deemed viable, but we could see that it was going to become more viable with another development. So it feels like the timing doesn't quite match up here, and if this application comes in front of us again when LIM 07 is approved, then I think it's a lot easier to get our heads around as a package. But that's where I am at the moment anyway.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? Okay. Well, oh yes, Wendy, you wanted to come back on a couple of points.
Yeah, it was just sort of reminding members that this is because there's various comments about it being in a coastal preservation area, the principle of additional traffic along the road itself. The site is a preferred allocation for 12 houses in the emerging local plan, which indicates that the council have taken the view that this is in principle an acceptable site for housing. Now, I recognise there is one element of that policy, which is the safe pedestrian access, which this scheme isn't delivering. But in terms of additional traffic on the road, that would be an inevitable consequence of bringing this site forward for development. So I think in making that allocation, the council have taken the view that additional traffic on the road to access this site would be acceptable. Also, you know, in terms of the principle of the land being lost from the currently designated coastal preservation area and any associated landscape impacts, which obviously can be mitigated through good design and landscape, inevitably there will be impacts, have all been deemed by the council in bringing it forward in the local plan to be acceptable. So I think it's important just to keep sight of, you know, of effectively what this council has already, how it's already assessed that site. Where this site doesn't comply, that this current development doesn't comply, is the fact that the allocation does talk about providing safe pedestrian access. Now, the site itself does show that it's putting in provisions to be able to link in as and when, if the site to the north comes forward. But we are also having to view this application on the basis of the tilted balance in favour of sustainable development, where the harm has to demonstrably and significantly outweigh the benefits of the development. So if the only significant harm is deemed to be the fact that there isn't pavements along the road, but it's a road that we're being told is used by pedestrians a lot already, so there is already an expectation of motorists that they will encounter pedestrians. There's is the provision of 6 houses, bearing in mind that this road forms part of a regularly well-used pedestrian route, that's what we've been told today, is the additional foot traffic that will arise from this so going to make such a difference that it would be so harmful as to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of delivering housing on this proposed allocated site. So I think that's just an important thing to bear in mind.
Okay, and I'll just point out, I'm just doing a quick count up on Google Maps. There's something like perhaps 15. It's a bit hard to tell what exactly is separate houses, but there's something like 15 houses between the application site and the main road. The application site lies maybe a couple of 100 meters, from the main road, which does have a bus stop, and there is some pavement there. Okay, I didn't see who was first there. Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Okay, well, we'll just go Ian, Brian, Steve.
I just wanted to ask a question, actually. Is there any condition we can put to tie this to the second part of this site so that we can actually make sure that the affordable housing is delivered? I know you say you're not worried about it. It's a bit like we're not worried about South West Water when they do the sewage things, but we put things in there where we ask you to check that there might be a condition. Is there any way of putting a condition in there to make sure that the developer, if we were to give permission for these 6 sizes, does deliver or will deliver the affordable housing? Because otherwise I can see this bit being done, the next bit's too expensive, we either won't do it, in which case we lose out on the housing, or we don't get our affordable housing. In which case, either way, the residents lose out and the application or the developer wins.
And no, unfortunately, there is no way we could condition this or require a Section 106. We do obviously have the ability to, when a further application comes forward for the remaining part of the site, to refuse planning permission should it not provide the adequate affordable housing requirement. But obviously it would need to be assessed on its own merits at that time.
Then, in which case, Chair, I will be happy to put forward a motion. I cannot approve this as it stands at the present time, reluctantly. I understand the things is just because I don't believe we are doing the best for our housing allocation. So we are trying to, the balance is to do the allocation, to build up the houses. Why aren't we taking all 12 if that's what the site is allocated for? And then the affordable housing. And on that reason, I can't support this as it stands at the present time. And I understand about the balanced view on the houses. I understand we need to get more, but as you said on the last one, when it was for 4 or 5 houses, that didn't make that much difference. This is only for 6. If it was for 12, I would have a lot more difficulty turning it down, and there would be affordable housing, which would tilt the balance further in favour of building in the coastal preservation area, etc. So for this, I can't approve it as it is and would recommend refusal.
Okay, is that a proposal?
It was a proposal, Chair.
Okay, so, well.
No,
yeah,
no, I'm not seconding.
Logged
Oh,
in.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Councillor Barlow, what policy reasons would you give for refusal?
Building in the coastal preservation area, disrupting the skyline, the access, if you wanted to put that in, although again, Mike Howe isn't here to guide us on the fact that an expert has said there is no reason to not do access, so I wasn't going to bring access into it. I'll have a think about that while other people speak. But there are several reasons why you wouldn't allow it, for the simple reason it's not in our local plan, even though our local plan is slightly out of date.
Okay.
Okay, well, yeah, so that would be landscape impacts in terms of the skyline.
Well, overdevelopment, landscape insects, again, coastal preservation, Lympstone Manor right next door, again, protection for that area. Yeah, there's a load of things we can put in there, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure there are, because it's already been concluded that the impact on the heritage asset of Lympstone Manor is minimal.
Well, minimal or not, it's right next to a thing. And again, we haven't seen the proposal yet. So we're putting in for outline application. We don't know what they're going to apply for, but at the end of the day, I know you can turn it down at that stage, but it makes it more difficult when we give outline permission.
Okay, Brian, you want a second?
Thank you, Ollie. Bearing in mind what Wendy said earlier, I'm sure that, yeah, it's wishful thinking, no offence really, but you're saying, well, if Exmouth 23 is developed, therefore there could be a possibility of an entrance there. But it's not. It's in the strategic plan, but it's not developed, there's been no application. So surely the committee should make its mind and decision on what is before us and not is what possibly could be in the future.
I totally agree with you, Brian.
Thank you, Chair.
I think that's what the officers are talking about. It's that there is a possibility in the future, but that
Maybe,
has
maybe
not
not.
been delivered at the moment.
The here and now
No.
is what we deal with, Chair.
Absolutely.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Gazzard.
Yeah, just a question to Wendy. Could we also include that it's contrary to both neighbourhood plans as well?
Well, we'd need to be identifying again which harms and which policies in the neighbourhood plans that we're referring to, and it ultimately depends, I think, what harms are being identified firstly, I think, following on from this morning's conversation, and then we need to look and see, are there policies to support those harms?
I'm sure we could leave it to officers like in the previous one to sort out the final details of the neighbourhood plans when you don't know the numbers. We don't know the numbers offhand. Again, this isn't in compliance with the new local plan because of the access, because of the footpaths and the way that people can go. So there are several reasons why we should turn this down, in my opinion.
Chair, if you don't mind, I know this morning Mr Freeman suggested that he could tweak the wording to refer to the policies. I don't think he was talking about actually drafting. We do need to get some wording agreed now, and I'm sure Ms Ormsby will help you with that. But if not, it gets to the stage where if you want to delegate everything back to officers, you may as well delegate it back and we won't come to committee.
Well, I can tell you which policies are relevant, and you could pick out which ones. So, yeah, as Ed said this morning, you identify the harm, and then we can find the policies. So you mentioned landscape impact. Imagine that would be D1. Or possibly D2. It's
own, I believe
it actually is in the coastal preservation area, is it?
That's what it says it is.
Yeah, fine. I'm puzzled because the coastal preservation area must do some.
Because of the estuary.
I suppose that. Oh no, I know why.
Oh right. Sorry.
I'm just trying to work out what shape that coastal preservation area would have to follow. But I guess it includes the housing that's there already.
Yeah. Are you improving it basically?
Yeah. Okay. So you've identified landscape harm. That was the one I remember.
Well, and again, so we're working on our own local plan at the moment. This is built up outside the built-up area boundary. That's another one. Building in the countryside. Well, I know you're going to say, go on.
It is adjacent to the built-up area boundary, but technically it is outside, yeah.
I think we need to focus on the actual harm arising and also bearing in mind the fact that this is an emerging allocation. These need to be defendable reasons for refusal, not just reasons for refusal, but defendable reasons for refusal. So the matters that I've heard so far that you've raised, Councillor Barlow, is that you're concerned about the impact on the loss of effectively the development within the coastal preservation area, and the harm arising to I'm trying to give the word now, the purpose of that designation, adverse landscape impacts. You consider that they demonstrably outweigh the benefits of delivering 6 open market dwellings on this site?
6 open market, non-affordable housing development on this site. And I think this is the point that how you want me to word it, I don't know. The thing I'm very unhappy about is we are not delivering what the local plan has put forward. We are now playing decision we'll deliver half of what it is, and it doesn't give the full benefit to the community. So when you go to a community and I say that I am going to build on your lovely green, we're all NIMBYs, your lovely green patch, but at the same time I am delivering 3 affordable houses for your community, I can't say that to them now, because at the end of the day, the developer has decided to cut it in 6. Do the first bit, the easy bit, and we won't do the difficult bit, even though that's what's in the local plan. So we're not delivering what the local plan is allocated, 12 houses. We're delivering possibly, if we pass this, 6, not the 12. And certainly it would make it more difficult, in my view, to deliver those 3 affordable houses if you do this. And I don't know how you square that with the policies, because of course the policies on our present local plan, there are lots of policies we're going outside the built-up area boundary, in the coastal preservation order, anywhere else. If it wasn't for the fact of the tilted balance that we have to apply, we would not pass it. We'd not even think about it. But because it's in the local plan, it gives it a little bit of weight. And because we've got a tilted balance where we need the houses and the affordable houses, that should give it more weight, quite rightly. But we're not getting that. We're getting half of it. So either someone's being clever or I'm being stupid, which might be true, but...
We're not stupid here, that's for sure.
I couldn't possibly comment.
No.
I think we do have to consider that we need to take this application on its merits. Part of the site is in an allocation in the emerging local plan, but we can only give that limited weight at the moment. So we have to consider this in terms of the existing local plan and in terms of the tilted balance. Okay, Brian is your seconder, and then I'll come to you.
I was just considering these policies that one of the main reasons of my objection is there is no pedestrian walkway. It's a single lane track going onto the A376, which is a very busy road, as you know from personal experience, which is just being upgraded less than 100 metres from that junction to a new roundabout to the Dinan Way extension. Now, theoretically, what's been said in the past about Exmouth 23 as an access point will be coming off that same roundabout. It's going to cause absolute chaos. And looking at, as what I said earlier, not to contradict myself, we have to look at what we've got. And what we've got is a single lane with no pedestrian access, with no passing places, with insufficient lighting, coming onto a bend on the top of a junction on a hill. And in my book, that is not safe at all for the pedestrians, school children going to school, as mentioned earlier. So if there is a policy that someone could find about the safety of the public, I think that is a very sensible situation that we could use as an objection. But I don't know where that policy would be, I'm sorry to say.
No, well, can I just point out, we're looking at the additional impact of the 6 houses. If you think about Lympston Manor and the amount of traffic that generates, your argument would almost be against Lympston Manor. The point is, people do walk up and down the road. I agree there's no safe pedestrian access. If you were walking from this development up towards the main road, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, there are a number then of entrances that you can use as a refuge, as aforementioned.
Only by chance.
Well,
they're not designed, sir, to be there, are they? They're just people's entrances to the house.
Okay. I'll just let Yehudi comment first, and then you tell me what you've got. Have you logged in? Do you need to do it again? They seem to be a bit...
Oh, beg your pardon?
That's all right, Brian. I just want to say I want to be stupid together with Councillor Barlow. The thing that I'm struggling with is I'm complicit within this, putting this site, the Exmo 23, into the local plan. And what we've got now is somebody coming in and saying, no, we're not doing it as a complete thing, we're doing it in bits. And that disturbs me. And I'm really unhappy in somebody doing that.
Okay. I don't know if there's a policy that covers that, but I'm seeing quite a few hands up, but Eileen has indicated she has something to speak as well.
Yeah, I just found the Lympston neighbourhood plan. New development should be well linked to and by footpaths.
Okay. Councillor Heath, John.
Thank you, Ollie. I'm just mindful of this paragraph here on page 11 of 43. And it's just relevant, I think. Under the adopted local plan, the application site sits outside of the built-up area boundary and is therefore within the countryside in planning policy terms and therefore subject to the provisions of Strategy 7, which is development in the countryside. And the strategy states that development in the countryside will only be permitted where it is in accordance with a specific local or neighbourhood plan policy that explicitly permits such development and where it would not harm the distinctive landscape, amenity and environmental qualities within which it is located. And it's very, very arguable that this development will do so. Thanks.
Okay. Wendy, do you want to come back on anything there?
So again, I've been listening to the conversation about proposals. Well, I'm assuming we're still really discussing Councillor Barlow's proposal and reasons for refusal. It seems to me, listening, that there's two main areas of concern, which is the impact on the coastal preservation area and adverse landscape impact. Those adverse impacts are not demonstrably outweighed by the benefits of the lack of safe pedestrian access from the site to local facilities would result in reliance on use of the private car, contrary to policies TC2, Strategy 5B, paragraph 115 of the MPPF, or what I'm understanding members' principal concerns to be. So obviously that, you know, those are reasons that could be used if that's the way that members are viewing this site. But I think I would advise members that, you know, to think very carefully about this, because you know, in terms of our housing land supply situation, this is adjoining the built-up area boundary. So Strategy 7 is out of date in the context of considering this. We're just looking at this purely as, is this a sustainable development? And any harm arising from it needs to be quite severe, effectively, for us to be able to justify refusing planning permission. The key issues that are being raised really is that the site isn't delivering affordable housing. We regularly consider schemes that come to us on the edge of built-up area boundaries for small quantities of development that don't meet our affordable housing criteria, and we have approved them, applying the tilted balance. So in this context, the site is no different. It's a site proposing 6 dwellings on the edge of the built-up area boundary, where our Strategy 7 related policies are out of date. There is some identified landscape harm. Yes, it's within a coastal preservation area. However, the site is proposed as an allocated site where those impacts are inevitable if the site is going to come forward for development. And then the remaining issue is safe access to the site. And it is acknowledged that there are no dedicated footways that link the site to the Exmouth Road, from where there are bus routes, footpaths. But this is an unusual situation in the fact that we're advised that the site, that road and that route is commonly used by people as a footpath. It links into a public footpath. And so in that situation, is the reliance or the use of that road demonstrably harmful to justify refusing planning permission? The officer view is that it is not, and applying the tilted balance and giving some admittedly limited, but nevertheless looking at the direction of travel in terms of how the council have assessed the site, the officer view is it will be hard to sustain, to successfully defend a refusal if that's the way that members want to go. But if obviously that's the proposal before you, I have set out the two reasons for refusal, and you don't have to accept both of them. It could be one or both of them. But the officer recommendation is that planning permission, well, it remains that of approval.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
I think it's worth noting that the East Devon Way does come off of that main road after 6 houses on the north, so it actually doesn't pass this site at all. It comes off and navigates off this. So whilst we're saying that it's a main walking artery up until that 6 house on the right, it deliberately comes off that route so that it doesn't Thank you. So I think as we're so heavily focusing on this pedestrian issue, it's worth noting that the actual path, the main artery, doesn't pass this development site, potential development site.
Okay, thank you for that. Ian?
On the tilted balance, can you just explain to everyone, again, when you're doing this balancing thing, one presumes a preservation area, coastal preservation, you know, that must carry some weight as well, more than just if it was in the countryside, in outskirts of Honiton or somewhere like that, that wasn't in a special area. That's why you have a special area. So again, the tilted balance is a little bit further in the favour of that. And then you get no affordable housing, which again is just open market housing, which is great. But again, this is supposed to deliver affordable housing, which it is not at this point. So again, the tilted balance surely should be tilted a bit further. I know you're the experts, and I do listen to you always. I don't like going against it. But to me, this just smacks of someone trying to squeeze in a little bit. They own the land over the road as well. You say it's all in the same ownership, did you say?
No, the land to the south,
To
the,
the south,
the
right, sorry.
remaining part of the
The
allocation.
remaining part of the land. So why wouldn't you, why wouldn't you put in outline on the whole lot and then just develop the front if that's what you want to do? I understand that there are cost implications to do it, but the difference of putting in an application for 6 with all the bits you've got to do, or the 12, is almost irrelevant on the overall cost of putting up 6 or 5 or 12 houses. And I don't understand why you are saying if we're desperate for housing, it should be to the developer, put in outline for thing. It ticks our box. It's better for us if they put in outline for thing, even if they only then develop the 6. But it's still better. We deliver affordable housing and we deliver more houses for the scheme. The tilted balance, again, it's automatically, as soon as we talk tilted balance, lack of housing, that's what we've got to do. And we support you for that because we know we've got that problem. But in this case, I don't think it's right what you're doing or what they're doing, what we're allowing them to do possibly.
I'll just say, even in a coastal preservation area, you've got to be able to show what the harm is. It's not just that you cannot do anything in a coastal preservation. It's the same with the green wedge. You've got to be able to identify the harm.
Yes, I totally agree. But obviously, on the top of the hill there, so it is breaking the hill line. At the end of the day, it is opening up. So there is no gap between the houses, whereas at the present time there is a green gap. However, you know, small, looks quite big on the photos, etc. So there are many reasons for not allowing it. It's certainly defendable. It's not like you're going to get costs against you. It is defendable because at the end of the day, even though our plan is out of date on some areas, not all of the areas, and the coastal preservation is still one, that hasn't changed. It's not going to change because it's on the skyline. And you can imagine if you're going up the estuary, you would see that. And again, there is this thing about the tilted balance can only go so far. It is a balance, and it's finding that balance as you weigh up the pros and the cons. The cons are we're not getting affordable housing on this site, which I think is wrong for the community. I don't have a problem with building houses, as you know, in the past. I'm quite happy to support you.
Okay, well, do we have any further speakers? If not, I think we're going to have to go to a vote.
Are we sticking with those 2 reasons?
Yeah, I think we need to, before we go to vote, we need to establish the reasons for refusal.
So my question was, I suggested 2 possible reasons for refusal, one relating to the impact of the coastal preservation area and landscape impact not being outweighed by the benefit of the 6 open market dwellings. And a second one was the lack of safe pedestrian access from the site to local facilities. So it's whether or not members wanted to, felt that both, or one, or more to the point, Councillor Barlow, as the proposer, are you proposing one or both? The reason I'm saying that is obviously if a planning application comes in the future, if having regard to what you've said today, that if we are then still left with this issue about the pedestrian access, it may be more challenging to overcome that. once it's been established as a reason for refusal.
I have no issue with I live in narrow lanes, and I walk narrow lanes quite often, and at the end of the day, I don't have a problem, people don't have a problem. So I don't have an issue, that's not my issue. My issue, as I said, is again, it's not just the coastal impact. So impact on the coastal preservation order outside the built-up area boundary contravenes the Exmouth and Lympstone plans, whatever, the neighbouring ward, whatever, and also overdevelopment and disrupts the skyline. Now, again, I don't know the specific ones that relates to the problems, but they were basically laid out with the Lympstone Parish Council, the reasons that they were doing. And again, they make perfect sense. That's exactly what it does. So it's very visible because it breaks the skyline. I don't know whether that is covered in the one you're looking at, which is EN.
So I think, so I would suggest that from what you're saying, I mean, you're talking about overdevelopment of the site, but they're proposing 6 dwellings on half of a site that's allocated for 12 dwellings. It's an outline application. The scale of those buildings can obviously be determined at reserve matters stage. So I think it would be challenging to say that it's an overdevelopment of the site. I would suggest that there was a reason for a refusal along the lines of the harm arising from development within the coastal preservation area and resulting adverse landscape impacts are not demonstrably outweighed by the benefits of delivering 6 open market dwellings on the site, contrary to Strategy 44, Strategy 46 and Policy D2, and then any relevant neighbourhood plan policies that could be delegated to officers to review, and also relevant reference to the NPPF. And just so that members are aware that the emerging local plan does propose to take this parcel of land outside of the coastal preservation area. It is in it now, but it is proposed to be removed.
Brian.
Thank you. As a seconder, I'd like to use the pedestrian access, or the lack of it, the lack of street lighting. I'd like to use that as an objection, because it's been used on many occasions on other places, which is just as bad as this. So I think it's a relevant objection. The lack of public safety and pedestrian walkways.
You might need to discuss this with Ian because he's shaking his head. I think also what Mrs. Ormsby was saying, this could prejudice a further application if it comes in as a full proposal for the entire allocation once the new local plan is adopted. By the way, if you look at the, we can't see them now, but if you look at the illustrations in the slides that accompanied the officer report, this area is a much smaller part of the whole allocation as originally proposed for the emerging local plan. You can see that as a blue line, whereas this one is the red line. So if you have a look at the slides, you can see that. I also looked at the Exmouth neighbourhood plan policies, and the only one I can really see, well, there's 2 possibly. Development proposals should seek to conserve heritage assets. You could argue it doesn't. And new development should be mindful of surrounding building styles and ensure a high level of design. But obviously, it's only outlined, so it might be hard to argue on that one. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I just wanted to jump in, Chair, because it seems to me, just listening to this, is that Mrs. Ormsby's trying to find some reasons to help you out potentially, but at the end of the day, she doesn't think it's got much legs, and it's probably a bit of a waste of time, and you're likely to lose, and it might affect them future applications, which are going to be bigger than this. And I think what she's gently trying to tell you is it's not a good idea, chaps. then you're probably better off taking that advice on board and picking your battles. But ultimately, it is your choice at the end of the day. But I would, strongly advise that you listen to your planning manager who's trying to help you out.
Councillor Heath.
I certainly see where my colleague Ian is coming from, because on the balance of probabilities, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, is it, that concerns have been raised that the application to the provision of only 6 dwellings is seeking to circumnavigate the affordable housing policy. And on the balance of probabilities, that would be sustainable. And, whilst it may not breach any statutes, protocols, procedures, policies, whatever, it's quite deceitful of the developer to be doing this when they are proposing to build 12 properties. So why don't they just then come forward, build the 12 properties, not circumnavigate the 25%, requirement, and then there would be less contentiousness, in my view. Thanks.
Right, but right now we have an application for 6 homes, and that is what we've got to consider, not what might come forward in the future or what should have come forward. I mean, the new local plan hasn't been adopted yet. It's only emerging, so we can't give much weight to that. So I think we're getting a bit tied up.
I didn't say that.
On this
actually, I didn't say
housing.
that, but I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, okay.
But this is sharp practice, in my view. I'm sorry.
Well, quite possibly, yeah.
You can say that, Shelby.
But
I just think, Chair, that the balance that we look at is not as close on this one as it would be on others. So therefore, I stand with my proposal as it is, without the access issues, which I accept at the end of the day, I don't think are not only defendable, but I don't think they are as relevant to this as everyone thinks. So I will stand on that if someone is willing to propose what has been recommended by Mrs. Ormsby.
Brian, are you still willing to second, even without the pedestrian access issues? Mrs. Ormsby, do you just want to outline what possible reasons for refusal we have?
That the proposal is recommended refusal having regard to the harm arising from development within the coastal preservation area and resulting adverse landscape impact is not demonstrably outweighed by the benefit, demonstrably outweighs the benefits of delivering 6 open market dwellings on the site, contrary to Strategy 44, Strategy 46 and Policy D2 of the East Devon Local Plan, and then it be delegated to officers to add in any relevant neighbourhood plan policies and reference to the NPPF.
Okay, so that's all clear. So we have a proposer and seconder for refusal. Those in favour, please. Of refusal, yes. Hand up, Colin. Yeah.
Oh, pardon again. It's becoming... One, two.
Okay, well, that's carried. Good luck. Okay. Right then. Have we got to the last one? Yeah. Right. So this is agenda item 11. This is land adjoining White Farm Lane, West Hill, Ottery St Mary, pages 119 to 140 in your agenda pack. Is everybody okay, by the way? Does anybody need a break or anything, or shall we just crack on? Okay, we'll try and wrap it up in 25 minutes, Colin. You've got to go, Bethany. Okay, that's fine. We're still quiet anyway. Who's doing this? Right. So Mrs. Ormsby's going to present the report on this one. And this is 25-2209 FUL land adjoining White Farm Lane, West Hill, Ottery, St Mary.
Right, so this is an application for the construction of a single dwelling. And this shows the, well, the red line shows the location of an area of land. It actually goes beyond the application site, but it does show the general location. And you can see that here is Higher Broad Oak Road in West Hill, and here is White Farm Lane, which is the access road to the site at the end of the road here. And you can see obviously it is, so it's the black line here shows the built up area boundary for West Hill. So it is just outside the built up area boundary of West Hill. So in the countryside where strategy 7 is a relevant policy consideration. And it is worth, just because it shows on this plan and no others, you may recall that relatively recently there was an appeal allowed for, I think, 5 houses on this site here. That was application reference 232612 OUT. And the relevant aspect of that appeal is that the inspector took the view that, notwithstanding the fact that there are no footways, dedicated footways into the centre of West Hill, that the site, the inspector referred to the fact that within this area, this rural area, that they didn't consider that the lack of safe pedestrian access was in itself a reason to determine the site unsustainable and in itself to be a reason for refusal. And I'm just pointing that out because this application site, similarly, there are no footpaths along White Farm Lane. It is a very quiet residential road, but then also when you get into Higher Broad Oak Road, there also are very intermittent, limited footpath connections up into West Hill, where you find the services, the school, the shop, etc. So this is the application site, and as you can see, it's only half of that wider green area that we were looking at. There's no special designations on the site. And here is a Google aerial image of the site. You can just make out here, so it's wooded, it's all quite heavily wooded here. You can't tell terribly well, but you can see it's in the kind of lighter brown, that this area of land has been cleared from trees, and that was done quite some time ago. There was a previous application, I think back in 2015, if I remember rightly, which was refused, and there had been some tree clearance in advance of that application, and there were various concerns raised and conversations raised about whether or not that should or shouldn't have happened. The situation is now that there's been no further felling of trees, but the area of land that was cleared has been effectively kept clear. So there's been some maintenance of that cleared area so there's been no sort of natural regeneration. So it remains a cleared area within the site. I should also add that the area is now subject to a provisional woodland TPO to protect the trees that remain on site. So this is the proposed site plan, and as you can see, they're proposing a single dwelling in this location with a double garage and access coming in through here. And we have our arboricultural impact assessment submitted as part of the application, which confirms that no further trees would need to be felled to accommodate the siting of the development. And in addition, because the previous 2015 appeal, one of the reasons for dismissing that appeal was the fact that the inspector felt that there could be pressure to prune or fell trees within the site beyond what had already happened. That application was in outline with no indicative plans showing how the site, how a property would be accommodated on the site. We now have a detailed proposal showing how the site would be developed with an accompanying arboricultural impact report. And we've also had a daylight study submitted, which confirms that the dwelling would benefit from suitable amounts of daylight without requirement to fell or prune any of the remaining trees on the site. Here are the elevations of the proposed dwelling. It's a substantial dwelling. It's 11 metres in height when measured from the west, taking into consideration the slope of the land. 8.5 metres when measured from the other side, from the east side, 22 metres long and 8 metres in width. And as you can see, it features a sort of a gabled element with some apex glazing, and then a flat-roofed element here with a natural sedum roof, and a roof terrace with on the flat-roofed element that you can see here, not a sedum roof. Apologies for that. And these are views of the garage, which pick up the same style and materials as the proposed dwelling. And you can see the plans indicate a three-storey building. However, the third story is sort of in the mezzanine, located within the roof space of that of the main element up in here, this element here. So the dwelling would have 5 bedrooms, and there would be 2 covered terraces on the north and south elevations. Surface water would be dealt with by a soakaway and foul drainage, which are shown here. Just again, it's important to see how they might impact trees. So you've got the soakaway here and a package treatment plant in here, again located beyond the root protection areas of any of the trees. So here are the photographs of the site. So this is looking along, so this is the actual entrance into White Farm Lane. So that's the route if you were walking in towards West Hill, that is the route that you would take. This is the route up White Farm Lane towards the site. This is, again, the site is just around the corner here. And so this is the gate into the adjoining property, Pine Trees. The access into the application site is through here. Effectively, the other side of this hedge is the application site. This is within the site, so this is looking south from within the site. And this was taken early December, so the sun's very low in the sky. And also you can see I suppose the site at its worst with no leaf cover on many of the trees. Agricultural land beyond. And this is a view facing southwest from within the site. So these are trees that are covered by the provisional TPO, and only the ones sort of at the front of this are within the application site, because the application site doesn't include the entire area. And that's a view facing west from within the site, and then looking northeast towards the neighbouring property known as Pine Trees. And this is actually just showing that this is the main plan submitted as part of that 2015 appeal site. So it didn't show how you would locate a dwelling in a way that was going to be satisfactory and having adequate light, etc. Another key aspect to consider in terms of comparing this scheme with the 2015 scheme, so that was refused on the grounds of the principle of development effectively being outside of the development plan and considered to be in an unsustainable location. Since then, we've now had supporting evidence to demonstrate that there could be a dwelling could be accommodated in there, although I should point out that there still are concerns raised by the council's arboriculturalist. We have no 5-year housing land supply, so we're now applying the tilted balance. So the fact that it is outside of the development boundary is not on its own a reason for refusal. An inspector has recently looked at a site which could be comparable in terms of the nature of the routes to the local facilities of West Hill, where they've deemed that the lack of pedestrian footways would not in itself be a reason for refusal, and therefore judged that that site was sustainable. And I do recognise that all sites are taken on their own merits, but I think the relationship of this site with the is similar to that of the one on Lower Broad Oak Road. So overall, the officer view is that having regard to the tilted balance that we're now applying in favour of sustainable development, and the fact that the officer view is it has been demonstrated you could accommodate this dwelling on the site without need to fell trees, with the daylight study indicating that there should be adequate light, which would reduce the pressures for tree works in the future, plus the TPO on the site, which gives added control to the trees, and the benefit of delivering a new dwelling outweighs any harm, which is some localised impact on landscape character, because obviously there'll be a dwelling where currently there isn't, the conflict with the adopted development plan, and there is, you cannot rule out that there may be some potential pressure to prune and fell trees. But as I said, the officer view is that the tilted balance weighs in favour of the development, subject to conditions as summarised in this slide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ormsby. So we have 2 objectors. Brian Cooper first.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My house is adjacent to this proposed building plot. My registered title includes all of White Farm Lane, and this plot is at the far end of the lane, and it is accessed over my land, and I speak therefore on behalf of the 5 existing houses in the lane. As just mentioned, an approved application 23/2612/OUT on Lower Broadwood Road has been cited as a precedent, as both applications are beyond the built-up area boundary and in open countryside. Application 2612 comprises 5 substantial 5-bedroom houses built in open fields next to a public highway. It is a planned and spacious small housing estate, enabling safe street access to the public highway for both vehicles and pedestrians. It will have ready access to the usual services and sewage disposal. By contrast, the site at White Farm Lane is at the end of a long lane, narrow and unlit. The site is unserviced, with no access to foul and storm sewers, and is very shaded. It is a mixed woodland that has been clear felled to prepare for this planning application. The site remains woodland in nature and was recently protected by a TPO to preserve the surrounding woodland as it regenerates naturally. Pedestrians, of course, must reach the village hub over the lane and thence via Higher Broad Oak Road. This site is suboptimal for building and was rejected for planning 10 years ago as it was unsustainable. Meanwhile, Higher Broadoak Road is increasingly busy, with more delivery vans and children now encouraged to walk to school. Pedestrians are at risk here from thoughtless drivers. So if approved, East Devon gains one extra 5-bedroom luxury non-affordable house against its annual target, which I understand is 1,156 houses. West Hill, I understand, has already met its housing target. West Hill describes itself as a woodland village. West Hill should surely preserve areas of woodland that contribute to the character of the village and not see them destroyed in this way. If approved, developers will doubtless cite this application as a precedent in future planning applications in West Hill and in the wider district. Planning department resources will then be consumed on similar one-house applications that contribute very little to the district's housing target and destroy our countryside in the process. I urge you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And Anne Cooper, please.
Good afternoon. My name's Anne Cooper. I'm a member of the West Hill Parish Council, and I'm speaking on my own behalf and not representing the council today. Nothing has changed regarding the sustainability of the development on this site. It is still unsustainable for all the reasons which were cited at the last appeal, and in fact the level of traffic on Higher Broadoak Road has increased significantly over the past 10 years. This in turn makes it harder and more dangerous to walk along. We see ever more delivery vans on the road and people buying more things from online. Primary school children are now encouraged to walk to school and make use of the new shortcut pathway recently opened last August that enables direct access from the school from West Hill Road, making this a more direct and straightforward walk for them. Senior school children also walk along the West Hill Road, along this route to join their buses. The route is therefore especially dangerous and busy at start and finish of school day, something the planning officer may not have witnessed during the visit last November. The only thing that has changed since the previous application was made is the implementation of the tilted balance. The balance is in favour of sustainable development beyond the built-up area boundary, but as this development is unsustainable, the balance should not apply here. It is outside the built-up area boundary. This is a proposed development in local countryside, so Strategy 7 applies. At the time of the previous application, there was no local or neighbourhood plan policy that explicitly permitted such a development, and nor is there today. The reasons that the previous application was rejected as unsustainable are equally valid today, and therefore the current application should always be considered as unsustainable. Furthermore, I believe the spirit and the intent of the tilted balance principle is to help with the development of more affordable housing, and not, as in this case, merely building a single luxury building that clearly is not for the first-time buyer. So this application should be rejected.
Thank you. Okay, we have heard from West Hill Parish Council, so Amanda, you're going to read that one out.
It's me now.
Oh, right. Adjust your hearing aids for a
There we
northern
go,
accent.
you with my soothing northern tones.
Yeah.
All right, so this is from West Hill Parish Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present a written statement. West Hill Parish Council does not support the application for the following reasons. A major concern for West Hill Parish Council is that this proposed development is outside of the built-up area boundary and therefore conflicts with Strategy 7 of the local plan. We are also concerned that a previous appeal decision for a development in this location considered the development to be unsustainable, and nothing in this application indicates that this has changed. Given that an appeal was dismissed in significant part due to the intrusion on the landscape and the impact on the character and appearance of the area, the Parish Council is very surprised that there is no comment from the Landscape and Green Infrastructure Officer. This site slopes steeply down to the west and lies above fields to the west. There is no question that this development would intrude on the landscape and be visible across the wider open countryside beyond. Even more so during hours of darkness when lighting visible through the western boundary would intrude on an otherwise wooded landscape. The tree officers have objected to the application. Their report comments on a letter from the Forestry Commission to the owner stating that tree felling where clearance takes place in advance of the planned application undermines the planning process, masking the proposed development's impact on the trees and woodland. Over time, natural regeneration of trees can be anticipated to restock the woodland. The report then goes on to note the natural regeneration has not been allowed to take place, as during a recent site visit it could be seen that all natural regeneration has been cleared. This demonstrated behaviour does not inspire confidence in the developer's intentions regarding the future protection of the woodland on the site. Once again, the BNG report indicates that 100% of the biodiversity net gain comes from buying credits in an external habitat bank. It appears that West Hill is being asked to accept a house that it doesn't want in exchange for exporting its wildlife that it actually wants to keep. Many of these points have been noted in the planned officer's report, but essentially dismissed on the basis of the tilted balance due to the absence of a 5-year housing land supply. The tilted balance, however, is not absolute. It is, as its title states, a balance. In this case, the Parish Council argues that the officer has not given sufficient weight to the harm to the character of the area. The negative impacts of this proposal significantly outweigh the minimal benefit of providing one single luxury home, and West Hill Parish Council considers that a truly balanced decision should be to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. Okay, we'll hear from the agent, Keegan Faraday.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, to confirm, the application seeks full planning permission for the construction of one new dwelling. As detailed by the officer, the planning history for the site is limited to the 2016 appeal, which sought outline permission for a new dwelling. As an outline application with all matters reserved, the appeal submission lacked detail, including the design and siting of the dwelling, including its relationship with the surrounding trees. In addressing such matters, the current proposal is supported by both arboricultural and daylight sunlight analysis, both confirming compliance with all relevant standards. The daylight analysis confirms that there will be satisfactory levels of light within both the proposed home and associated amenity space, significantly above the recommended minimum levels. As such, this would limit any future pressure to remove or prune any trees. This is reaffirmed through the arboricultural assessment, with all trees on site retained, and for further reassurance, the adjacent woodland is now protected by a TPO. Whilst the site is just outside the built-up area boundary of West Hill, which spans north of White Farm Lane, by virtue of the short distance to local services and adjoining established residential dwellings, the site cannot be considered isolated. As highlighted by the officer, appeals within West Hill have concluded it would be unreasonable to withhold permission for a development of this sort in the village on the basis of the need to travel by car. Notwithstanding this, as outlined again by the officer, the council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and as such, the presumption is in favour of sustainable development. We're at committee today, namely due to local objections received predominantly regarding the location of development, impact on trees and ecology, as well as the character of the area. The proposed development presents a high-quality design that draws on site-specific qualities, including its woodland setting, with shapes and high-quality materials providing a thoughtful transition between the more urbanised settlement and neighbouring farmland, remaining bounded by trees. It is considered the appeal issues have been thoroughly addressed, and in light of an out-of-date development plan, the application should be determined positively. Objections have also in part been raised due to falsely alleged clearance of the site. For clarity, since the appeal, the site has been largely left unmanaged, with any works undertaken prior to the previous appeal carried out within the limits permitted by the Forestry Commission. Given officer support for the proposal and that the application would deliver a high-quality, sustainable dwelling which protects amenity and enhances biodiversity, we respectfully ask the committee to uphold the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we've got a statement from Councillor Jess Bailey, and Amanda's going to read this one. Okay, thank you.
as you say, a statement from Councillor Bailey. I strongly object to this application for the following reasons. Number one, trees and woodland, the clear policy conflict. The tree officer raises a substantive objection identifying conflict within policy D3. The site was historically woodland with full canopy cover. Progressive clearance and removal of natural regeneration demonstrate continuingly woodland degradation. Policy D3 requires a harmonious and sustainable relationship between development and trees. That test is not met. A large domestic dwelling in a constrained woodland setting creates an inherent conflict and predictable long-term pressure for tree works driven by shading, safety concerns, debris, and garden usability. A tree preservation order is not mitigation. It regulates decline but cannot prevent incremental canopy reduction or safety-based removals. Risks already recognised by the tree officer and previously by the planning inspector. Approval would institutionalise continuing pressure on protected trees and undermined woodland character, contrary to policy D3. Number two, countryside and landscape harm. The site lies outside the built-up area boundary and conflicts with Strategy 7 and Neighbourhood Plan Policy MP1. The planning inspector previously identified harmful encroachment into the countryside. The officer report itself acknowledges conflict with Strategy 46 and Policy D1. Number three, unsustainable location. The site lacks footways and safe pedestrian connectivity, reinforcing conflict with Strategy 5B, TA1 and MP9. And finally, number four, planning balance. The limited benefit of a single dwelling does not outweigh the clear and enduring harms identified above. Paragraph 11 of the MPPF does not require approval where adverse impacts are demonstrable. To conclude, for all of these reasons, planning permission should be refused. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Okay, questions? Oh, Councillor Smith.
And I've got a question.
Okay.
Could I ask Wendy if I did try and search for it in the gap we had, but whether this site will be in the emerging local plan included? Because I noticed there was a lot of housing outside of the built-up area boundary, and I think it was your first slide you had. You could see a lot of housing was already outside the built-up area boundary, so I presumed it was due for a shift at some point.
You mean is the built-up area boundary moving and is this site going to be within it? I don't know whether it's moving, but if it was proposed to be within, if it was, this is not an allocated site in the emerging local plan. I wouldn't expect that even if the built-up area boundary was moving, it would include it unless it was proposing it for development. So I think it's reasonable to assume that it is not going to be within the built-up area boundary as proposed in the emerging local plan. I can quickly try and check, but I'm pretty confident of that. Well,
okay, thanks, Simon. Ian, Councillor Barlow.
I just wanted to point out what the appeal inspector said on the last appeal 10 years ago about the trees. It is unlikely that further trees would need to be felled in order to accommodate a dwelling. So she was aware, so it was a lady, she was aware that you wouldn't have to take any trees down to fit a house in. However, future occupants of a dwelling in this position may seek to fell mature trees in order to gain additional light into the garden or to reduce the scale of leaf clearance required in the autumn. Any such felling would contribute to the intrusion of the new dwelling into the countryside. So again, I'm just pointing out that she was aware that you wouldn't need to take any more trees down, but it's the pressure that you get afterwards, especially when you're not talking about a little house, you're talking about a big house. And I don't want to get into debate at this point, but a big house, £750,000, you want a bit of garden, you want a bit of light.
Okay, you stopped so suddenly there. You caught
Sorry,
me.
it wasn't a question. I was just trying to make sure that everyone had all the information rather than just a question.
Okay, Eileen, Councillor Wragg.
Thank you. Parish Council commented on the landscape architect not having given a report, but on page 129 says impact upon the character of the area and landscape harm, and in that references the planning inspector's comments on the harm to the landscape. So I just wondered, who wrote that in this this report? Was it the landscape architect?
It doesn't have a heading, so I'm assuming
It
that
says,
it's...
no, it doesn't say
yeah.
who's it by.
Yeah.
It usually does.
Yeah, well, it's mainly descriptive at that point, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it might be.
Yeah.
That's just, no.
So yeah, that would have been the assessment of the case officer. We wouldn't routinely consult our landscape officer on a relatively small scale application like this, simply because they don't have.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else wishing to comment here? Ian?
One little question. Have they done usually with up in West Hill, anything we do up there, because of the bat roost and the flight path and the beer quarry caves, etc., there has to be a light pollution and all the rest of it done. Has that been done? I couldn't see anything on that. It's just there's a lot of
Have
glass.
you had a look in the conditions to see?
A lot of glass in the new building, which again, I'm always concerned about.
Yeah, yeah.
Removing lots of the biodiversity in that area already with the houses we have agreed to put there recently.
There is an ecological assessment. It says recommendations found within the document titled Ecological Assessment Proposed New Dwellings, produced by Redstone Ecology. So that presumably that condition has taken all the possible ecological impacts into account and suggested mitigation.
Yes, through you, Chair. So there is a section within the report on the impact of ecology, and it identifies the site may be used by foraging bats, but it's not suitable for roosting, and concluded that no Natural England licence would be required, but obviously suitable mitigation measures required during and following construction, and that is proposed to be encapsulated within the planning condition, which I think requires compliance with, that basically requires development to be carried out in accordance with the ecological assessment that was submitted in support of the planning application.
Okay, any other speakers? Anybody want to come forward with a proposal? We've all had enough. Do you want to take 5 minutes to
No,
get a
not
cup of
now.
tea?
Let's get on with it.
Well, okay. No, I'm just concerned that maybe we're all a bit brain dead and maybe we'd like 5 minutes just to refresh ourselves and come back and see if we can give this application the attention it deserves. Ian.
Well, I'll kick it off, Chair. I'm not going to make a proposal because I don't want to get in any more trouble. The one we put, the one that was discussed in Perkins Village on the appeal, on the executive summary, it said the benefit of adding 4 additional dwellings to the housing supply, the benefits of proposal economy of attractive weight, moderate weight. We're getting one house here, and we are putting it in an area where you are going to put pressure on trees. The previous appeal officer did it. Common sense would say, even your picture on a sunny day showed that there was no sunlight at all in that whole garden area. So you're expecting to put £750,000 house up with, at best, rhododendrons in the garden that like a bit of shade, but nothing else is really going to grow there. And I just wonder, what are we doing to get one house in that you are possibly, again, putting more pressure on? We passed 65 the other day up there in an area that I supported it because at the end of the day, it was in a field. Yes, we were losing some biodiversity, but not the trees that make that a special woodland village. And here we are going in to squeeze one little house in an area where you are going to put pressure on trees. And I just wonder again, if this balance is just automatic. We're short of housing, you can do what you want. And I just think that sometimes perhaps we should stand our ground and say, do you know what? It's not right for one house to benefit, whatever you think the benefit of that one house is going to make on the 1,500 or 1,200 houses that we're short, 0.01% is going to make any difference to that? No. But what you are going to do is, again, put more pressure on the biodiversity that we're supposed to be protecting in that, especially in that area where the trees go. But I'm not going to make a proposal. I'm just pointing that out. That's my opinion at the present time.
Okay, Councillor Wragg.
Yeah, I agree with what Ian's just said. And, well, quite often agree with you. We're both awkward, I suppose. Impact upon the character of the area and landscape harm. I see that, you know, I don't see how anything has changed. The planning inspector concluded that there would be harm. I think so as well. I think this tilted balance, we've got to be consistent on it. And I don't think if we allow this today, we won't have been consistent. And one property, I mean, we need affordable homes for housing. You know, this would be quite something, I think. And I won't be able to support this application. So I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything, but I'm quite happy to make a proposal to refuse. Unless somebody else wants to say something.
Councillor
support
Levy.
you.
Sorry?
I'll support you.
Okay, so that's a seconder. Yes.
Harm to the landscape.
Future pressure on trees, I think you mentioned. Sustainability.
Outside the air.
Sorry, Chair, again, you need to put down decent ones. You can't argue, as it's been pointed out, very recently, and I know this one says it's unsustainable, but very recently we had one just a little bit up the road that was sustainable, so that would supersede that, so I wouldn't argue that point, because otherwise we'll be told off by Wendy.
Okay,
Yeah,
I thought that was on another road.
Outside the built-up area
It's
boundary.
outside the built-up area boundary. There are some neighbourhood plan policies which are cited, I think.
Could I
yeah,
just come in?
yeah,
and just
please do.
say that the only thing that I've actually heard, because there's obviously been limited debate, is concern about trees. So if that's the concern, then I think the sensible thing is to just stick with what it is that members are concerned about, rather than looking for multiple additional things, which will ultimately be very hard to defend. I think the previous appeal which obviously was really quite some time ago, there were 3 issues. Location of the development with regard to the accessibility to facilities and reducing the need to travel, effects of the proposals on species and habitats, and effects of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area. And I think in terms of looking at this site, it is it's a relatively contained site. I mean, as I said, I'm just saying that the only thing I've heard anybody really concerned about is the impact on trees.
And the biodiversity of the bats.
There is no, so the trees, in what way do you anticipate harm arising to the bats?
Again, it's a green corridor that is used by roosting bats, even though they're not roosting at that space. Redleaf have said that, or our people have said that?
So it's identified as it's used as for foraging, but that wouldn't ordinarily sustain a reason for refusal. For example, you could, to be fair, I don't know what's in that ecological report, but you could, for example, put a condition on regarding external lighting, which I think would cover any potential impacts on bats. So I think it would be very challenging to defend an argument on impacts on bats in the absence of any objection from our ecologists, and the fact that there's no bat roost. And it's very unusual for us not to be able to mitigate impact on bats through the use of conditions.
Okay. Any other? Yes, Councillor Gazzard.
Sorry, I know it's getting late, and I mean, obviously this dwelling is going. It looks like it's open the sticks to me. Is the waste from the house going to be in a septic tank, or is it going to go to the mains? Septic. Oh, I must have missed that. Sorry.
Sorry, you're asking if, basically how they would deal with foul drainage, are you?
Yes, they're proposing a package treatment plant within the site.
Well, there is an ecology report, which I think has not given rise to any concerns. Yes, but our ecologist would have looked at it. It's presumably acceptable as it's part of the conditions, condition 5, that there are recommendations in the document.
I realise you can do all sorts of conditions that make things better, but is it going to improve the ecology of the area by putting a house in the middle of it? And the answer would be no to that, which I think anyone could argue quite happily if it was appealed.
In our planning policy terms, there is no requirement to improve ecology. There is the statutory requirement for biodiversity net gain, which is gain, and that can be legitimately dealt with through off-site credits. So the key thing we're looking at in terms of the site is that there's no adverse impacts on ecology.
There would be, for the simple reason you're saying that you're going to do any biodiversity package outside of the area. So to the area, and this is what we're looking at, as you always say, the planning application in front of us, in this area, it would not be better. So the biodiversity wouldn't be better, the ecology wouldn't be better, even though at the end of the day you can say that we can put in mitigation for it, it still would not, it must be detrimental to the ecology by putting a house in the middle of a field. That's just a fact.
But yeah, That's, yes,
What
but
we're
that's,
arguing, can you defend that in an appeal? Yes, you can.
well,
The
not
idea is-
really, because that argument would apply to any development whatsoever.
And then you have the tilted balance where you look at the balance. Will the balance, the benefits outweigh the negatives? And we are saying here at this point that the benefits do not outweigh the negatives to this site. In my opinion, that's what I would argue.
Okay, I think, just, do you want to add
Yeah,
something, Eileen?
To say, I think what you're saying, Mrs. Ormsby, is because the trees have already been cleared, that trees are not that important to the landscape now.
No, I think the trees that are on the site are
Yeah.
are an important feature. They're a wooded area on the edge of West Hill, and they have value. And for that reason, you know, we wouldn't want to see any further loss of trees
No.
on the site. And so that was part of the assessment of the scheme: is it likely to lead to pressure to fell or prune trees in the future? And the council's arboriculturist did raise some concerns in that regard. The planning officer looked at it and looked at the fact that they had done a lighting study that showed that there would be, you know, more than adequate natural light to the dwelling itself, and the fact that the trees are covered by tree preservation order, that, you know, weighing that in the balance, the tilted balance, which applies to all, the tilted balances needs to be a consideration in all housing schemes, whether it's one house or whether it's 100 houses. We apply the tilted balance. And arguably the benefits of one house are limited, but equally you're talking at a much smaller site area, so arguably the house. So we do need to apply that. So as I say, that is the view that the officer took. If members have a different view, then the loss of trees would, I acknowledge, in terms of picking up the comment raised by Councillor Barlow, the loss of trees would impact on biodiversity because trees add to biodiversity value. So if there is a genuine concern that the development could lead to felling or pruning of trees, then that could have an impact on landscape character and biodiversity as a consequence. But the development as it is proposed without the loss of trees, with the mitigation measures that we accept routinely on developments like this as mitigation of harm, I wouldn't say would justify that on its own an ecology-related reason for refusal.
So what you're saying really is we haven't got a leg to stand on in refusing this. And it's unfortunate that West Hill don't have an up-to-date neighbourhood plan. If they did, that might give them added protection.
Through you, Chair, please. So the trees are protected by TPOs. What happens if you cut down a tree that has a TPO? You get a fine? Yeah. Yes. How much is the fine? 2,000. And what is the value of this house? Do you think that it might be worth their while to cut some trees down?
If I could just come in, the fine is dependent, I think, on effectively the development value that's being created up to a limit. They can be substantial fines.
And it's not the point of that. If you actually apply and there is a tree that, should it look a little bit dangerous, or there be a limb coming off it, or it's blocking out light, even though you've got a thing that says, oh, there's plenty of light, the next person living in that house might disagree with you. And then it just puts pressure on those trees. Are you putting pressure on those trees in that area? Yes, the answer is going to be yes, and it must affect the ecology. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I would. I think you have got a leg to stand on. I don't think at the end of the day you should back down and just say no to this. I think you have got a leg to stand on. You don't give full weight for one house, although you've got to give the tilted balance, you quite happily say in one where you're giving 4, you only give it moderate weight in favour, because at the end of the day, and that's your officers saying it, so again, with one house, you'd presume you would give it even less than moderate weight.
No, as Wendy said, the one house is a much smaller site, so the harm is also less.
I agree, but then this is an area, a special wooded area, whatever, it has protection on it anyway, and it is important because we have put a lot of houses next to it, and we are already using up the biodiversity. You can't improve the biodiversity in that area. I'm not going to go on about it. That's my view on it.
Well, they accept they can't improve the biodiversity in that area, which is why they'll have to purchase off-site credits. But that is a legitimate way of achieving biodiversity net gain. We might not like it, but within
and
the
you take that into
regulations
account
it is.
in the balance, don't you? When you add up all these things of what it is, and I think that's the thing, that there is no biodiversity in that area that you can gain, so therefore it's losing out on that. It's losing out on everything, and it's gaining one house, which isn't affordable.
Okay. Well, I think we need to put this to the members. Eileen, how are you minded? Do you want to continue to propose refusal?
Yes, yes, I will, and hope, leave it to the integrity of members, and I'm sure they'll do the right thing.
We had a seconder, didn't we, Councillor Levine? I think it's future pressure on trees seems to be the main one.
Ecology as well, so.
Trees and ecology.
Yeah.
So, listening to what I've heard, my suggestion for reason for refusal, the siting, I mean, this obviously can be refined, but the siting of the dwelling in close proximity to trees would lead to pressure to fell and/or prune trees with adverse impacts on landscape character and biodiversity, contrary to strategies 46 and 47 and policies D1 and D3 of the local plan, plus any relevant neighbourhood plan and MPPF references delegated to officers.
And what about the built-up area boundary? Wouldn't that apply?
My view is that that I think that would be harder to sustain. I think the principle, applying the tilted balance means that strategy 7 effectively is out of date. So the fact that it's the wrong side of a line on a plan wouldn't in itself, I think, be a reason for refusal that we could sustain at this point. If you consider that the site is in an unsustainable location with poor access to local facilities, that could be a reason for refusal, rather than it just being per se outside of the development boundary.
What's your view on the unsustainable location of it?
My view, having regard to recent appeal decisions and the nature of West Hill, the fact that it literally is the other side of the built-up area boundary, and West Hill is characterised by very few footways and footpaths. And as we've heard earlier, there's already a lot of children, for example, walking to school on these roads. The addition of, it seems that it's very much the character of the area already to have people walking these routes, which is, I think, quite different to, for example, the site we looked at this morning, which was just simply remote from any facilities. There's nothing even close by that you would even consider wanting to walk to. So my view is that that it would be difficult to argue that this isn't a sustainable location in terms of access to facilities. And my recommendation would just be to focus on that one particular concern that you've raised.
And in the appeal, do they, when they look at the balance, do they just look at what they're you've put forward as the reason for the appeal, so in other words, just trees, are they going to take that in the balance against the thing, or should you put in that it's outside the built-up area boundary, because that isn't changing in this area? Would that help the appeals inspector say, well, actually, I've got two things here. I'm gaining one house, so I'm looking at the balance. Where does the balance lie? And that's it. I don't know how they work. You're the expert.
So, I mean, the fact is, it is a fact that there are no safe pedestrian routes into the local services because that's the nature of the area. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to add that as a reason for refusal if members were concerned about it. It is part of, as you've said, the planning balance. On its own, I wouldn't consider that to be a reasonable reason for refusal, but it could be added as a second reason. Well, it is a defendable reason. I'm not sure how successful it would be, bearing in mind the comments that I've already made.
But it is a clear line.
Chair, it has been successful in the past. And it says, by virtue of the excessive distance to public transport links and facilities in West Hill and the surrounding area, as well as the road network being unsuitable for pedestrian or cycle access to such facilities, the occupiers of the proposed dwellings would be largely dependent on car-based trips to access shops, employment, leisure and community facilities. The proposal would therefore constitute unsustainable development, which would be contrary to policies S5, countryside protection, and TA1, accessibility of new countryside, new development of the adopted East Devon local plan. That was strategy 7, which is now defunct. And 5B, sustainable transport. And policy TC2, accessibility of new development. So it has been refused on those grounds before, and I don't think any harm would be done by adding it in.
But it is outside, very clear, black and white line, outside built-up area boundary. That is not changing in the new local plan. So I would go with that if I was you. But again, that is the built-up area boundary stands, even though there's houses outside of it. They're not new houses, they're old ones, they're just not in the built.
Amanda, could we put the plan up? Just the application.
It'd be interesting to see where we put all the houses around it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would quite have liked to argue sustainability, but given that an appeal inspector has concluded that Lower Broad Oak was, oh, it's that one. I thought it was the one, the road going south to the left of that when I looked at it. No? Okay, I think
Go to the vote.
yeah, the two.
Are we voting on 2 reasons or 1?
Do you want to go for the 2, Eileen?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to go for the 2. So this is on pressure on trees, future pressure on trees, and sustainability and outside the built-up area boundary being linked.
Cumulatively.
Yes, being linked together because it's outside the built-up area boundary. It's not in sustainable location.
Clarify, is it the fact that there's no
Yeah,
where's the harm arising from that?
Yeah, that's the problem, Ian. The built-up area boundaries established by Strategy 7.
And
that's
with
now-
the tilted balance, it's an out-of-date policy.
Yeah.
So what we need to be focusing on, what is the harm arising from a development outside of the development boundary? And what I've heard people talking about is there's no safe pedestrian access and reliance on use of the private car would be the harm arising from that.
Okay, so with those two reasons, is the seconder happy with those two reasons? Okay, in that case, all in favour of refusal? And against refusal? One. And abstentions?
You went out for part of the...
Being that, so they have to abstain. So,
No,
yeah,
right,
so councillor
okay.
needs to abstain as well, so 3.
Okay, 2 then.
10 now, is it? 2, 4,
2 abstentions.
Yeah, it all adds up.
Yep, it does. Yeah, because the numbers keep changing, Damien, as people disappear. Okay, in that case, that is carried, and that brings our meeting for today to an end. Thank you all for attending. Thank you to councillors. Thank you to those who came to speak, and so on. Okay, class dismissed.